when people keep secrets and they take them to the grave with them, so the secret never gets told. Lost secrets are truly not secrets. Well, they were secret once, and so that they're secrets only because they were lost, but not because they're actually supposed to be secret. They're not supposed to be secret, but they were and then were lost. They're called lost secrets. Uh, Apollo, the sun god, was a older brother of Eres, the god of war, and the son of Zeus. Apollo was a god of music, and he was a god that was also a god of medicine and known for curing disease of all kinds. So priests of Apollo would be able to cure disease often, and would be doctors or people that were like doctors. Uh, so medicine would come up in the priests of Apollo. They'd be the medicine priests. In fact, I think the Hippocratic Oath is Apollo's. And Apollo also is known for divination and divining. And ultimately, Apollo used a woman for the divination. Now, in the Apollo's, in the Oracle of Delphi was a woman, actually. And it could lie to you. It could certainly mislead you, because if you were to access the Oracle of Delphi and you were wrong, like you weren't a good person, or if there was something Apollo didn't like about you, well, the Oracle of Delphi would not lie to you, but tell you something that ultimately might not reveal to you what you needed to know. But, like, for instance, saying that the best king will live to a king, if he asks if he's going to live, well, of course the best king will live. Well, what if he's not the best king? He might not have asked that question. Ultimately, like, it could be deceitful. It could tell you something that, like, isn't true, but it is true. So the way that it words it, the Delphi Oracle was designed to be wording it a certain way that if a person was trying to get information from it, and Apollo didn't want them to have that information, then it would tell them in a way that was confusing or deceitful, or they wouldn't understand what the answer was. But it would always be true and always tell the truth. The Oracle of Delphi was a woman, and the reason why that was or is because the woman was chosen by Apollo to represent the man, and so to have the Oracle of Delphi as a man, or represented by a man, it could happen, but he'd have to be worthy of a representation by a woman, or he wouldn't be, because understand that there's a relationship between the god and goddess, which was something that created Apollo's abilities above his own father. I mean, if you look at Zeus was not a god of a lot of things like medicine or curing, or people would assume Zeus could do anything Apollo could do. It certainly not. And ultimately Zeus might have been stronger than Apollo by far, but maybe that's his gift, or this was his gift, his utter strength. So Zeus might have had some ultimate strength that was just way stronger than everyone else, but that would be Zeus's idea of what this was, Zeus's strength, and it was just the only thing he really had. And he might have been smart and everything, but Apollo was into music, reading music, the musical language, into curing disease, studying and researching for how to create or cure just about any bacteria. So he would have been a scientist every kind of great thing spawned from Apollo, and what he did, including divination, and all tarot readers, all fortune tellers, well, they would all be accessing at some point the Oracle of Delphi, or some version of it. You'd have to be accessing it from Apollo. So Eris was a god of war, and he didn't have his big brother. He didn't even care to be his big brother or his dad, but he wanted to be more like his dad. So Eris was he liked his dad. So Apollo was an older brother, which was not like his younger brother or his dad. So it's just interesting to note that. There was some kind of interaction and secret communication between the goddesses and Apollo, where Apollo helped him, and he'd also was one to put plague on people. So Apollo was a god that could plague societies, and he plagued the Achaeans with disease and plague because they disrespected one of his high priests, and kidnapped his daughter and wouldn't give him back. And it was exclusively King Agamemnon that did it. But King Agamemnon his god was Zeus. He didn't care about what Apollo thought. And so he would have dismissed Apollo's opinion, even if it was from the god himself. Well, Agamemnon was a man of Zeus. So he would have thought of Apollo as a silly boy, which would be a mistake, and why he would end up dead in the way he did. And ultimately surviving that long, it's kind of crazy how it works, like Achilles makes it all the way to a certain spot. Achilles being loved because he's this see, the vixen in a goddess is a version of what became not okay in a woman that was being wrong as a goddess. And Minerva would have been seen as being wrong as a goddess to the cultures of today, because she's actually a version that went against her father, and ultimately her father would not be even accepting on the level of back then, at least, and even not now, maybe. But there's an original version of what Minerva, his daughter, was, as compared to also Hera, who was already in he didn't approve of her either. So the wife of the god was seen as bad and untrustworthy, and Hera was seen as definitely not good. Zeus would look at Hera and say, like, you're a difficult wife that I don't know much about, but except to say that you don't cooperate with me, and you won't give me what I want, and you're kind of against me, it seems. Ultimately, Zeus would be like, I think you're outright wrong and bad. I don't even know why you're my wife. And so that would be the ultimate saga of Troy, or the Trojan War. The saga of the Trojan War would be that the wife of the god Zeus was, well, a vixen herself. She was bad. Now let's look at that. But there was, before she was bad, and in the Trojan War, see, nobody's going to ask the question, if the story starts where we get the story, if it starts where there's a god Zeus and then there's a wife Hera who's bad already from some past things that happened, then our story starts out where the wife is already having a problem. It just happens that Hera is against Zeus and actually tried to overthrow him. So she actually tried to overthrow Zeus once, like destroy him, take him, like kill him, basically. And he punished her and hung her upside down for a whole year. Hung her upside down, tortured her, and she hung there for a whole year. So basically, his wife was someone he had to punish in such a manner, and she'd already tried to overthrow him. Everybody that was all the gods were in on trying to overthrow Zeus at one time, including Apollo. and Poseidon, the god of the sea. Poseidon was the brother of Zeus and Apollo, the son. So the uncle and the nephew were at one. They had to build the Trojan walls of Troy. So they were built by Poseidon. Poseidon and Apollo had to become human. Poseidon and Apollo were being punished. That was their punishment. So there was different punishments for different. He punished each person in his family, and they were all in on it. That includes every one of them was in on it. He punished them in different ways. Like some of them really got punished badly, and some of them just got kind of made to do something, like had to work. And Apollo and Poseidon were only made to work, and they were actually made to become human for a year. So they had to actually be humans for a whole year, which is interesting because they went down to Troy, Apollo, the sun god, and Poseidon, the god of the sea, and turned into humans because Zeus turned them into humans. And then they went to the Trojans and introduced themselves, and the Trojans knew who they were and ultimately thought they were still gods. So they were the guests of the Trojans for a whole year, as the Trojans believed that the gods were living with them for a whole year. And they also believed that the gods came in human form because they could see. They did. But they believed the gods were the gods still. And so they actually thought that these two gods that were with them for a year, that helped them build the Trojan city walls, that would become impenetrable. Those walls, even the god Eres couldn't breach them. Even the god Eres would try to breach those walls and wouldn't be able to get through because the gods built the walls. Even the gods couldn't get through them. But that was partly how the impervious nature of the Trojan spirit reflects men and the egotistical behavior of the ego. The ego is kind of like the walls of Troy. The ego is very strong, and it can't be penetrated. You can't really hurt an ego that is itself. Like you won't get through it to its barrier. It'll be strong enough to absolutely hold its own kind of thinking process without being swayed or influenced. So the thing about Apollo and Poseidon getting punished by Zeus to go build their walls was the Trojans thought they didn't know they were human, which is interesting. I mean, but after the gods went back up to Mount Olympus, the Trojans became very egotistical, thinking we are the best ever because gods lived with us for a year. I mean, they had a chance to. The Trojan society and most Trojan men had a opportunity to meet the gods and get to know them personally, like friends, like friendship. And Poseidon and Apollo were living there in Troy for a whole year as human beings, talking with them, eating dinner with them. These Trojan people, these men, the society of during this time, well, they had a privilege that was unheard of. It was ultimately like there's no society that's going to have God as your friend living with you, or two of them. It would have been like we're the greatest ever, luckiest ever, best ever. Ego comes into existence ever because it's actually spirit in men that before it was all messed up. It was honored by God as the greatest thing that ever was. So the ego in a man that we have today is the result of a living spirit, which is still alive, and it started in Troy, where the ego was developed during the well, it certainly came out of Hercules. There's another place it came out of later, but Hercules was an ego because all people have to have God and goddess, and all men that are born from two parents, well, that's the version of masculine and feminine, or God and goddess. So everybody on earth is going to be born with the spirit of a goddess and a god, kind of like a mom and a dad. And if it ever was that this earth started out as an earth that had people on it that were created in the image of just their God, well, then it wouldn't have been the same as if they were created in the image of their God and a goddess, the mother too. So the spirit of God that would be creating men in Adam, well, they wouldn't be creating. Eve would take it too. So Eve would just be an Adam. Eve would just be having God. Eve wouldn't even be Eve, and certainly not a woman or a goddess. As a helper companion, she'd just be, she'd just be Adam as a woman that wasn't a man, that was supposed to be a helper companion, and she's not a goddess. So there's no reason why she could say she is later on. And in the Trojan War, well, they're telling you a story, which is saying that Zeus had a daughter who was divine, and she was a goddess in the sense that they admit that. So if that's the case, then we're talking about the actual history of what is Greek mythology is going to insinuate that gods were born, well, probably different from men, meaning that a woman in the gods world would have been divine, like a goddess. But yet, because Zeus didn't have a wife that was just a human, or even a daughter that was just a human, you know what I mean? And it would have been important to say that if Minerva had been just a human that was living up on Mount Olympus with her father, well, then that could have been possible. But the fact we know she was actually his daughter through the fact of however they reproduce, gods do. Yeah, we know that it was really a goddess. Well, then they're saying that those goddesses, they really existed, and then the mythology ends at a time where there is no more. Mythology doesn't talk about today or even in our recent past. Mythology talks about long ago, a time long, long ago, that also ends long, long ago. See, mythology doesn't come into the future. It's in the past, and it's way in the past. And that means that what happened in the mythology and then what happened after the mythology was different. So when God created man, it would have been after the mythology. And whenever the mythology was, it might have been before man or even before this earth. So the story of Troy being real doesn't mean that there was really a Trojan War that was real, that was on Earth. It could have been before Earth was created. Certainly in the spiritual sense of the matter, it is and was real, whether or not it was something that existed before our current world. Certainly there was a Troy somewhere on some world, and it reflects true spiritual, living entities. So, you could say there was actually a Troy on Earth, or if there wasn't, then it was still real because there was actually a Troy that existed, because of the entities that are here today are a byproduct of that existence, meaning we are who we are today because of Troy and what happened in the spirit to the behavior of men, which is still not only influencing us, but we are who we are as a result of it. So it had to be real. The idea that that you are a woman that is loved by a man who can be an equal after a time when God was going to be making Adam. Well, you have to understand, if the Bible's real, well, then Eve is a companion helper, and she'd have just God's spirit. So God would put his spirit into Adam, and so Adam would take God's spirit and have it. Kind of like Hector would have Mars when Mars possessed Hector to fight Hector, but God would put his spirit into Adam all the time. And maybe he'd lose some of it and have to get some of it. But the reality is Adam would then be from God, and then Eve would be from Adam, not from God. So Eve came from the rib of Adam, which was the man. And so the idea of how life was created since either Troy was in possibly another world or the mythology existed, well, if mythology is not real, then it could have been on some other world. But ultimately, everything in mythology is absolutely real in every sense of the word when you're talking about intangible spiritual growth. Like my spirit in my head is real. The consciousness in my brain is certainly alive and dwelling in my head. So however I'm animate right now, however I'm alive and my consciousness is not physical. My thoughts are not anything you can grab a hold of. They're not tangible, which means that my thinking process is a mystery. It's an utter mystery, but it is real. It's not real. So you could say that my thoughts can't possibly be real, or my thinking process, like how could I possibly think my thoughts, or my emotions? How could they be real? Well, the emotions can't be seen, touched, tasted, or smelled. They could be felt, and that's all they could be. So emotions are feelings that can be felt, or emotions are not feelings, but emotions are felt that can also be feelings, and feelings are also felt but are not emotions, because emotions come directly from a source which may or may not be in a location that it's from. So feelings don't really get transferred between one entity to another, but in humans, feelings are a result of emotions which do get transferred between one human and another. So emotions could be shared, and emotions could be put on you. Like I could give you an emotion by sticking it in, like I could put a sign on your back that says "kick me." That, you could put emotions on somebody and they'll respond to them and it'll create feelings. Their response creates their own feelings, but the emotions don't come from you. They may be coming from anybody, whoever you dealt with last. The Trojan War was it was a creation of an ego that was thought to be great by men and loved by men to have. And even women loved it. And so the ego was loved before the Trojan War, where the ego went bad. So the Trojan story of the Trojan War in the Iliad is where it's a story that shows us that the ego goes bad in the War of Troy. The ego goes bad. It becomes disapproved by the goddesses. So that's why Hera's bad, Minerva's bad, and ultimately Zeus is in the story of the Iliad. Zeus is threatening to kill his own daughter. He's calling her the worst vixen that, it's like I can't stand you, daughter. And his own wife, he says, like, I can't stand you either. Well, because the ego that's truly reflective of what the ego thinks of women. During the Trojan War, the goddesses were going to kill every man that wouldn't recognize them as divine God, and they would have said, "There's only one God. There's not there's either there's not a helper goddess companion, or if there is a helper goddess companion, she has to be my helper companion too, and so fine, she could be a goddess too, as long as she does help me and is my companion and is a helper." Well, that would be what the ego would say or demand, was she can't demand to be a goddess if she can't be my helper companion too. And she would say that I don't have to help you or be your companion if you won't give me the recognition that I deserve. So that would have been why the new version in the mythology, the new version of what would be the new goddesses coming in after the Trojan War, which would now no longer include any gods or goddesses. It would only be humans. So the mythology would end right there. And all that would happen now is there'd be a bunch of all these women in this world that might have got some form of power, and it will be not accepted still by men. And so even today, the goddesses won't be recognized, and that's why they disappeared. So truly, if the goddesses disappeared, taking a look at that, let's take a look at that. The goddesses disappeared. There's only one God here now. And so there's a reason for the fact that they did disappear. And truly, there might be a good reason, like that they should have disappeared. Now, if my theory is correct, or if my educated guess is right, the reason why they disappeared might have everything to do with two things or two instances. And one would be the opinion of their own in the other. And two would be the other opinion, not in their own, in themselves and not the other. And so that would be two versions of people that were mixed in spirit. Like let's say that God wanted to punish us, so he said that I could be you and you could be me instead from now on. Like, let's say that I was me and you were you. So we fought then. I fought as me, like I'm not you. I fought. That's why we fought. So it was like God says, yeah, I created you and you were you and I am me. God created both of us. I got to be myself and you got to be you. So then we fought and then we messed up big time. Yeah, we just went out of control and had this big old fight. So then God said, well, next time I create you, I'm going to create you to be you, and you'll have to be you. And when you're born, you'll be thinking you're yourself, but you'll really be the other one. You see? So it was like as if you found out that the left brain that controls the right body is only a wiring that's only been around recently. That if you knew that humans used to be born before, and they they weren't born crosswired, like the left side controls the left side, the right side controls the right side, but now it's the opposite the because the God would declare that if you can't get along as yourselves and not the other, I'll make you be each other as yourselves, and you can still not be the other, but it'll be harder now. And that would be my educated guess is what I think happened. Was he rewired the brain when he had made the new people, destroying the world before because of the absolute refusal of people to get along. Also, it had a lot to do with giants. It depends on the world's been destroyed many times, but there was a time when the world was destroyed because of giants that took over, and also that just evil. Everything was evil, intent. Um, so I guess that the Trojan War was a result of where it went wrong. So it's a pivotal moment in history where everything went wrong. And Helenas was a man that would be capable of being not a goddess, but giving her the respect that she noticed, acknowledging her for what she was or what she wanted to be acknowledged as, which would have been kind of like a guy that would be polite to a woman that would give her the time of day, and ultimately it would be real and genuine attention that he might give her. It wouldn't be something that was kind of false or even kind of a behavior like a ritual, or even, something that wasn't actually what he meant. And so for that reason, the people that found Rome came from a Trojan named Enes. And Enes was the son of Venus, who founded Rome. Ultimately, Romulus and Remus founded Rome, but the spirit of Rome was founded by a man who was the name Enes. I think it's spelled Aenes or US. He was a Trojan, and Enes was the son of Venus, who was a goddess, truly. And I don't know who his father was. I don't think he was a god. He's referred to as the son of Venus. She also saved him in the story. Venus actually saved him, uh, but he fought as a Trojan warrior. And understand that who was allowed to become a founder of Rome and what Trojan was allowed to live. Well, what Trojan was allowed to live was Aeneas was the founder of Rome. He was allowed to escape, and he had to go on a journey that would create a new Rome, or new Troy. It would be the new Rome. And Helenas was a high priest of Apollo that was ultimately in the story. And in fact, there's a place in the story that Helenas talks to Minerva. So actually in the Iliad, you could see in the story, there's one scene where, or one place in the story where, yeah, it's only in one place. So it's just brief, but there's a place where Minerva and talks to Helenas. And then now that's about it. Helenas is just a brother of Hector. And there's very little said about him, except that he was an augur. And He was literally to find two new he would be a king over two kingdoms. So Helenus would after the Trojan War not only survive it, but he would be a king over two kingdoms, and the only one that would be, I mean, well, I would say I'm not the only one. I would say likely the only one that I've heard of, and the only one, maybe. But see, the thing is that some sons of Troy would be making new lands. Annis would find Rome, and then Rome would sprout up from what was, yeah, left Troy basically. And there'd be a story about the founding of Rome. There'd also be the Aeneid. Aeneid. Aeneid is a book about the adventures of the son of Venus, who was a Trojan, and then went off when Troy was destroyed to eventually find Rome. The spirit of Rome came from the spirit of Troy, and it would ultimately be different. It would be more. But what would become of Rome, this is important to know, what would become of Rome and why Rome would fall one day was written in the cards, because what founded Rome was the son of Venus spirit. And why Rome would have to fall is because of the son of Venus spirit getting rid of a goddess, like becoming her enemy. Ultimately, it would destroy the Romans themselves in the spirit. If a goddess is mad at you and she withdraws herself from you, the guy will be now not able to feel his emotions anymore or even want to. And much of the pleasures that a man may have or even could enjoy, he certainly wouldn't be able to do it anymore. A man would have to become unemotional to be okay, because he couldn't have pleasure anymore, because she'll take away a man's ability to enjoy himself at all ever again. And so that's the power of a woman, not a man. Zeus doesn't have to enjoy himself. Wouldn't even need to. He considered it not a problem. But the reality is all of these people, that Trojans that went off to survive, they were allowed to survive. They didn't get lucky. Nobody left Troy alive that wasn't allowed to, or they were allowed to. And nobody escaped Troy. Absolutely not one of them escaped. They were killed and murdered by the goddess. And then the ones that were allowed to live were, one of them was Helenus, and it's true, he happens to be my grandfather. And in the story, because on Ancestry.com, I was doing my family tree on Ancestry.com a year or two ago, and I found a link from one of my grandfathers who came from a line of Moravian kings, and it provided it to me and said had a warning on it saying this is mythological in origin, that this link may not be considered to be real. I thought it was very strange that Ancestry.com would provide me with the link and then put a warning on it saying this is not real. Like, this is just your grandfather, number, blah, 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 99 or something. And I was thinking, why'd you provide this link and then give me all the story in it? Yeah, inside the link, it was open up a whole world of stories and information, when they were born. Yeah, well, yeah, but it's not real, right? So understand that would be partly what I would experience. Like, Ancestry.com would give me a link that would actually do that for me. But that's crazy. You mean like my Ancestry.com family tree got a link provided by Ancestry.com itself, and it was not even real? Well, yeah. Why would they do that? That's just like a sick joke, right? Yeah. But what I found out is it's serious. It's for real. So I thought, what's my point here? Well, Helenus was a king over two lands. He would become a king over two lands. Well, he'd be over two kingdoms. One would represent the masculine kingdom, and one would represent the feminine kingdom. So the reason why Helenus would be a king that someday would be over more than one land, well, they would only say in the stories, in the mythological story, in the real history books, what they'll tell you is that Helenus was a man that would escape Troy and become a king over many lands someday. and that would be about it. So those stories, and if they do have stories that are specific to actually what happened, like the adventures of Helenus and what happened when he became king over many lands. I don't know if there's stories out for that, but all the people that actually survived the Trojan War would have been remnants of people that would start new civilizations somewhere else, and then create whole societies of people that would become countries today. And the different countries today that we have would be based upon all those Trojans that escaped and became different places. And Troy would have been mythological in origin, and also it was real whether or not it was in another world or not, because the spirit is real, and also there's a spiritual family tree too, that you have grandfathers that you came from. You also have a spiritual line of thinking thoughts and entities that you came from, which will be different from other people, which means that there's original entities that are original at some point in the beginning, and we all come from some form of set of original entities, and those entities mixed into different spirits and became different mixes, and it's interesting to note they're in exact different proportional mixes. So you might get, like, whole milk and then half and half, and then there might be like whole milk with half and half, that in the half and half had babies, and the half and half is now we got half and half with caramel flavor, we've got half and half with vanilla. Okay, so we're talking about, that's literally what it's like to understand what the humans became and what we're like. You could see how half and half could be all the different flavors. So you could say half and half is a form of human being. It's half god, it's half goddess. And it's got, like, then you could say if it's half and half, it's got half god, half goddess. Well, at least 50%, so it lost some. So it's important to know the half and half, if it's not whole milk, lost. Well, the 50%, it's not 100% in either side. It's only 50% on both sides, which means that, wait a minute, you're saying that if half and half is 50% milk and 50% cream, well, then isn't it 100% half and half? The milk or whatever the carton is in your hand? Well, no, it's not. The 50% of the cream makes the entire thing only 50% there, which means that when you buy half and half, someone might say that this thing isn't even, only half of it's here. I didn't want the cream. Let's say I went to you and I bought some half and half, and I had some half and half in my hand. I came up to you and I said, hey, there's cream in this. And then you could say, well, yeah, it's cream mixed with milk. Well, I didn't want the cream, man. Well, why don't you go buy whole milk or cream itself? Oh, well, I am half and half. Well, then you won't be able to buy some cream that's not some milk. Well, what about the milk? I can't be milk either. I'm half and half, man. I'm 50% her. I'm not 100% her, but I'm 50% him, and I'm not 100% him. And I'm now the part that's upset right now is the part that says that I want to be 100% him, and I want to be any percent her. Oh, you mean you wanted to be 100% like 100% of the cream, and you're a man, but yet the cream is the woman. So you're 100% of the woman? No, I'm 50% of the woman, and I want to be 100% of the man. So I want to be the whole milk. So what's the whole milk? It's the man entirely. So I buy some whole milk, and I bring the whole milk up to the counter, and I say, hey, this is all God, 100% God. And it's not goddess at all. It's just all manly God, 100% vitamin D milk. Okay. So what about the cream over there? Oh, this is cream. I pick up some cream. Now I got cream in my hand. This is goddess, 100%. She doesn't got any God. She doesn't got anything, but this is 100% feminine. So when you buy cream, you're not getting milk. And when you get milk, you're certainly not going to get cream. But you get half and half, now you've got the human race. And the half and half is truly 100% only if it works together. And only 50% at a loss of 50% if it doesn't work together. So if this half and half becomes just half, I have to cross out one of the halves. So let's say I pick up some half and half and say, hey, you see this half? It doesn't have the other half. This is called half, not the other. This is called half and not the other half. No, that's called half and half, man. No, this is called half and not the other half. Well, what do you mean? Well, yeah, I'm telling you, it doesn't have the other half. It's only 50% strong. So it might as well only be half here, you know? Okay, good. So are you happy with that? No, I'm kind of bent because I'm thinking it's the other half's fault that I'm only half strong, or that I lost half myself, or half my strength is gone. It's the other half I got rid of that is half my strength, and I don't like it or want it because it's a her. So it'll be the men. We're having issues in the human race, and the half and half is fighting with itself, and ultimately humans are in some kind of conflict emotionally because of the nature of the two coming together and maybe being in conflict. So what is the human race here for, and why do we exist? We come from um, a god and goddess, actually divine god and goddess, that was at war and fought and became really against each other. And the human race is ultimately the result of the punishment for that we came back together. So we're literally we're mixed with a combative god and goddess in us that is a spirit that makes men fight women, women hate men, and ultimately that we can love them too, because God and goddess could love each other or hate each other, but ultimately the human race is really not God and goddess, except to say in the spiritual sense only. See, our physical bodies are subjected to a life that is going to have death at some point, because we're not allowed to be gods and goddesses. We're only allowed to have the spirit of God and goddess that have been pushed together as a punishment. So whoever's punishing us, or why we have an inherent need to feel punished as a human race, it's because we are being punished as a human race. In fact, our very genetic nature of who we are is a punishment in itself, not in another. It's we are in ourselves, not each other. And so because of that, we are mixed genetically with each other first. So the first prerequisite for you to come in this world is that you are already mixed. So we are each other, in fact. And so you can't even be a baby or a fetus. Yeah, the two strands of DNA come from mom and dad. They mix before you're even allowed to be born. That means that whoever created us forced us to mix and come together as one first, already knowing that when we got out of that womb, we try to separate as soon as we could. And then we spend the rest of our lives trying to get away from each other and separating. It's the right brain fight with the left brain. It's the mom and you fighting with the dad. And you'll fight with the mom somewhere else. You know, the mom in you is also the mom that's outside of you somewhere else. And if you could say the mom in you is not somewhere else, but it is somewhere else, and it's also in you. But when you fight with your mom, you could say she's not in you, but she is in you. You could just see her as she's also outside of you. So you could fight with your mom outside of you, and you'll this will take a beating inside. The mom in you will be suffering from fighting with the mom outside of you. So you can get rid of her. If you do get rid of her, you'll still have her in here, and then you'll have to deal with the pain of ultimately what's left of her. And so humans are a result of whatever the entity is that we are, whatever makes our consciousness, our spiritual consciousness, intangibly intelligent. Consciousness itself being smart and wise, the capability of it is divine. Wisdom, intelligence is a divinity of an entity that has become human in a body that has been not allowed, but by law not allowed anymore, to be godlike or goddess-like. So whoever created us could have been an alien in a spaceship, no doubt, and it could have been anybody that could have created us, but they would have created us, and the reason why we were created was to carry out a battle, to finish some kind of a conflict between some god or goddess that was not human, much more inhuman, certainly not human. And we have somehow shared that spirit. We have that spirit, and we have them mixed. Before we're even born, they're mixed in an even proportion, half and half. We come into this world half and half. And so we're not whole milk and we're not cream, because I'll tell you what, I guarantee you that the law of the human race is you can't come to this world if you're cream, and you can't come to this world if you're whole milk. No way. But you can come to this world if you're half and half, and the genetics will damn well demand it, that there won't be any half and half, or there won't be any whole milk or cream allowed to be born in this world. And they programmed it into the genetics. They literally programmed it in there. They actually made it so that until the two strands couple, they can't begin protein synthesis or start DNA sequencing. And if they actually do start the protein synthesis or the DNA sequencing, then they're going to do line for line sharing of information. So they'll have to be, first of all, coupling to even start the fetal development. And then the DNA sequencing is something else that they did very strange. So you could look at just kind of the idea of conception and what has to happen to conceive. You can clearly see that two strands of DNA have to couple and become one. Otherwise, there's no possibility for conception. It is conception to have them two become one. And then the fetus can't start to develop until ultimately the DNA sequencing starts. And that's a line for line sharing of information. Both of them have only half, which means that neither one of them could make the fetus on its own. And isn't it interesting that you would think that, okay, is it even possible that if two strands of DNA could actually get together and become one, actually, that they would actually do a line for line sharing of information to actually tell a third party to create, through protein synthesis, the fetus? So think about this. Neither strand has the ability to create the fetus. Both of them only have each half the information on how to create it, and they have to do a line for line sharing to actually have all the information, which means that they can't take it for themselves. Certainly not, but each one will have to cooperate and actually share information line for line. So the two strands, you wouldn't even think that two strands of DNA could be reflecting any idea that they would not want to cooperate. Like understand though, certainly whoever created the human race made it so two strands had to share line for line. They also made it so each strand only had half the information. Understand that there's no natural reason that each strand would have half the information if the human came after the genetics. Because understand that if it came before the genetics, then our genetics wouldn't have developed the way they are. It makes sure that the third party is the only one that can make the fetus. So the third party is the unknown, we'll call it. It's the element which does protein synthesis to create the body parts, like the arms, the legs, the the brain, the spinal cord, and developing. Like somehow that's magically coming into the world, right? Well, it actually does. And so the whoever's doing that is the third party. So we have two parties. That's what becomes the baby, sharing information. And then we have the genetic diseases that are all possible if they don't. That's all the genetic disorders are all from during the fetal development. If the information sharing is not right, then there'll be things missing. And sometimes it could be like a whole leg or an arm. But on other occasions, it's only information that has to do with internal development of organs or other ideas of also like immune system capability. So everything that when it's creating your body, it's creating a million things that aren't physical legs or arms. So you could be missing a lot of things and your body comes out just fine, but you could be missing a lot of stuff. The third party doesn't know how to create the fetus. So it's the third party. It doesn't know how to create a fetus. It doesn't even know anything about it, but it knows how to follow the instructions. And so if the third party does it carries out the instructions as it's given the instructions, and then it can create the fetus. But if it's not given the instructions at any time, then it doesn't know how to continue, which means that the third party is not capable of creating the fetus. It's actually the what creates the fetus. So to say that it's not capable of creating the fetus isn't totally true, in the sense that it's not capable, because the two that give it the instructions are how it can do it. And if they stop giving it the instructions, it can't do it. So that neither one of these two first parties, him and her, even have all the instructions to do it by themselves, but they actually have to share to actually get a whole baby to come out healthy. And then the part that actually creates the fetus, the third party, well, it'll have to get every single instruction from both of them in order to even get it done. And if either one of them doesn't want to talk to it anymore, or stops communicating with it, it'll stop right where it is, right in the process of, it could be half done or a quarter of the way there or almost all the way there. Basically, if they stop giving instructions, it's done. It's done wherever it is. It might be half a baby there. So literally, the cooperation between two parties, him and her, that's God and goddess reflection of a third party, which is actually the one with the power that's not God or goddess. And the one with the power that's not God or goddess is the third party that actually creates the fetus, and it doesn't have any of the information or the knowledge. It doesn't have any knowledge. Understand, the part that makes the fetus doesn't have any capability to hold any knowledge. It knows nothing. It is without any knowledge whatsoever. So it gets all the instructions from the two that have the knowledge. The two that have the knowledge of the first two parties. The third party is completely clueless. And if the third party just carries out the instructions of what they're told, then they'll have the knowledge in so much as they're carrying out the instructions. So what the third party will discover is, when I made the fetus, I had no idea what I was doing, but I made it, and I was watching myself make it as I did it. And then I was also learning, wow, I didn't know what I was doing, but I did it. And so the fetus is developed by whoever created it, and they don't even know how to do it. They're doing it somehow, and that's the whole amazing part of it. That's about it. All right, see you next one.